Welcome, welcome everyone. We are here with Lee Carroll, who we've been a fan of for many, many years and read all of his books except for two, which is saying a lot because Lee is the author of over 20 books, including 14 books that he had channeled with Kryon. And here are some of them here. There's a lot of them. And for those of you who are new to his work, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background about Lee. He has channeled messages from Kryon for over 30 years. And these books are the result of that 14 books and other books, including the Indigo Children, an Indigo Celebration, and the Indigo Children 10 Years Later. So those of you who have heard about Indigo Children, these books are really what introduced the world to that term in 2000, which led to subsequent follow-up books by other authors, a movie, a documentary, and lots of interest in the world about our changing kids, right? And the Indigo books have sold almost 500,000 books worldwide in 24 languages. And then I love this. Delphi Metaphysical University surprised Lee with an honorary doctorate degree in science, transpersonal psychology, and metaphysics. And the award indicated for his extraordinary contributions of love, wisdom, and spiritual understanding. Lee has been named one of the 100 most spiritually influential people by Watkins Mind, Body, and Spirit magazine. Most of you are aware of that magazine. And they've been invited to speak at the UN 7 times. So, wow, what an honor it is to have you with us here today.
I love this. Thank you. Is this a great way to meet each other or what?
It is a great way to meet each other. Yes.
Yeah.
A long awaited time to actually get to this point. So we're just honored to have you on this program. And I would love to rewind the clock a little bit before we get to your current work, just for people who are new to your work and to channeling, because some of the viewers here come out of science, some come out of spirituality, but most are really wanting to understand that bridge between them, which I think you do so beautifully well. And Kryon does so beautifully well.
Absolutely. You know, today you can have a channeling course. There are courses and they're great. There are courses in intuition and people learning how to do it and cross that bridge. Back when I started 33 years ago in '89, there was nothing like that. In fact, it was just the opposite. I didn't want to do it. I was led to it kicking and screaming. It's a long story. Then there's a longer story. There's a shorter story. But basically not interested in metaphysics at all, period. In fact, I made fun of it. And so the story of that shift back there and that connection is actually a teaching story. And that means that as I tell people how it happened, it shows just how much love there is from spirit for us. And so it's like nobody knows us better than that which created our soul. That's what we call God or spirit or whatever you say. And that entity or that influence or whatever you call that knows us so well. And that led me right into it because I got a puzzle I couldn't explain because I'm an engineer. And so I love science. I love logic. I love things that make sense. And none of this did at all. Now all of it does, because I realize we don't know what we don't know. And there's a lot of things that are currently being discovered that I'm going, of course, but back then, no. So that bridge to cross it back 33 years ago in '89 was probably a little more daunting than it would be today. One of my biggest fears was that I would lose all my friends. I did. All of them. I had a godfather to one of my good Christian friends. He came and said, well, and we know what you're doing now, so you can't be the godfather anymore. All of the things that you thought would take place or that I was worried about actually happened. I was covert. It's just I could teach a course in fear because I was afraid. And what I was afraid of is being discovered by the real world, who would find out what I was doing even, and it would sound like, well, either believe what you're doing, Lee, or you don't believe what you're doing. So what do you walk a tightrope, and we do. It's just who we are. It's the practical living. It's all that is. We want our friends, and we would love to have our families come along with us and all. Well, it didn't work that way. Channeling was known as the occult. If you were channeling, you were the devil. Let's just call it what it is. And so I hid it. And if you look on my books, you'll find something very interesting, and that is my name is not on the cover. Now, it is on the Hay House books because that's their decision. But on my books, the ones that are released that I publish, you will find my name is not on the cover, and it's on the back in 10-point type, and it's called L. Carroll. So I hid, and for the first 3 books, I was hiding. Now, after things got going and it was better off, and I realized who I was, and I didn't have to hide, and it took me 3 years to really, while all these books were done, channeling was happening, 3 years for me to identify that I'm safe and it's okay and all that. But I kept that design just to remind myself of the fear. And it's all teaching. In other words, so many things happened to me, including how we came out and all this. All these things are teachable subjects. In other words, you get to see how spirit works with us. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, so true. So for people who are new, really new, right? Kryon, why the name? How did it come about? And when it emerged and came into your psyche, so to speak, how did that kind of unfold for you?
Kryon, we now find out, is when you do the numerology on all of the letters and things of this nature, there's all manner of things hiding energetically. When I first heard it, I laughed because I was I was given 2 channels who were at least 30 or 40 years apart in age and didn't know each other, and 3 years apart, and me visiting them gave me the same message. This is how it got me into it. So these things that can't happen. It's not logical. It's not scientific. You can't have people who don't know each other giving the same messages. But the message was that there's an entity named Kryon trying to get a hold of you. And when I heard the name, I laughed because all I heard from my perspective was the spray paint called Kryon. And so I got, I was a detractor. First of all, I was not a believer. And so I would always tell those around me, especially my wife at the time, Jan Tober, who was very metaphysical. I would say, look, spray paint is trying to get a hold of me. And, we made a big joke about this. So this is a crazy name. It's not one of those beautiful, sweet names with an A on the front of it. It's like angelic and has meaning. And I never understood it. Now, a little more, we realized that it was given, first of all, for that reason. So it wouldn't be sweet and lovely and all that, because I probably wouldn't accept it. And it sounds more like a mechanic, or something like that. Numerologically, it's an 11. And that is illumination. So I had to go through that training in Tibetan numerology, which we never teach it, but we're very aware of it, and Kryon uses it all the time because there are numbers, there's energy in numbers for us to understand. And this is just a wink from spirit. Names are spirit says we have many names on the other side of the veil, and they're all singable in light. And then you get into this whole multidimensional thing, and you realize how linear we've become with just about everything. Who we are, we look in the mirror, we're one thing, don't bother me with, I don't want to be part of something else, I'm just the one thing, I don't want to have soul sharing, Kryon says you do automatically. All of the things that we are linear with, Kryon plays with it. And so I think the name has been part of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And all names carry frequencies. Letters carry frequencies.
They do. And sounds in the air carry energies as well. So it's worked for us. People laugh because they said, well, you've been named that because quite often people cry when you channel.
I think it makes sense because spirit doesn't want to scare us.
Right.
And B, it has to somehow connect to our energy, right? And so if you were an engineer, that totally makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. From a speech and language standpoint, yes, everything is frequency, especially all of the sounds that come out of us, the vibrations. I guess one of my questions is this: who are Kryon?
Kryon is a group, and it's like any other channel. You'd be challenged to channel one entity, and even though many think they are, as they go forward, quite often you'll find yourself shifting, and other entities will come in and out, and pretty soon, if you do it long enough, you realize, well, they were all there all the time. They're just taking turns.
Yes.
And so this is the other thing that's so difficult to tell people. Spirit is a group. When you look at God, you think, and the way that the classical way we've been trained about God, it's an entity in the sky. We call it Father. It's dysfunctional. It punishes us. It does all these things. So it becomes a thing to fear. And that's probably one of the biggest things for all these 30 years we've trying to get people out of, which is their programming to this. It's a much bigger than you think, and it's a group. And that group is a coherent, love, compassionate, kind group that comes together like this, knows what it's doing with us. Don't think of a group as a collective thing that's voting. Don't think of a group as something that's around a table. Think of it as a coherent, scientific, something that comes together like everything we have in our body. It's not singular. It's a group of chemistry. It's a group of physics, and it works together in a beautiful way with the other things. And that's how we look at spirit as well. So a lot of people don't like it because we are so linear, and we want it to be a source. And we want to pray if we pray to a source. So we don't want to think of a group, but it is. And you can't get around that. Kryon is a group. I feel it. I always have. And I love that it is, because the more the merrier.
Would you say that Kryon is source?
Yes, I would. I would also say Anthony is source.
Beautiful.
So the reason we say that is because we're sitting here on Earth in these vessels as human beings, but we have a soul, and that soul is eternal. It has no beginning or no end, according to what Kryon has said. And that source, that soul, is from the creative source, made by it, part of God, if you wish. So all of us are source in some way. And this has been brought to me in these last, I think, 10 years, more than ever before. It gets us out of separation. And the separation and competition and all of that is an old energy. We are now starting to truly get it. What the Hindus and the Buddhists started giving us, look, you got to look at it as one. There's a oneness here that extends to absolutely everything, from the dirt of the earth all the way to you and your biology and your life and your past lives, all being, there's something there that is simultaneous and working together with all of it. So you go there and you start realizing that would include you and I. We have something in common. That's the first time I've seen your faces, but it doesn't matter, because I can look at you and love you. I know what you're about. I know what you're trying to do as an old soul. Yeah. And this has been, I say it's taken, I think it's only the last third of my experience, this has started to happen. We also have an acceleration of this kind of knowledge and energy and awareness on the planet. So there's a whole lot of people coming on board now who would be so tolerant to what I do that never would be before. Right. We just had so many, and a lot of them are a lot younger than I am. This is what I had always hoped for. I'm meeting young people doing podcasts all over the planet. And when I see this, I say, thank you, Spirit, because this was always a promise. We would start to see this when we started to seeing the advancement of higher consciousness, slow as it comes on the planet. And years ago, before the internet, Kryon said, there'll come a time when everybody can talk to everybody and there can be no more secrets. That is beginning to occur.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, we feel it too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the time is pivotal. And, the fact that you've been doing it for 30 years, it's like, wow, finally, you're probably thinking, finally, it's actually happening.
Oh, there's a tremendous amount of relaxation in this, because I felt I was swimming upstream most of my life. In fact, I mean, when you're on an airplane, I travel for a living. I think a 2.5 million mile flyer with United alone, and not anymore because we're not traveling much. But at that time, I would sit next to people, and you'd meet them, and you're going to be with them for 5-6 hours, and they say, "What do you do?" And so I said, "Okay." I don't want to lie to them, but I say, "Okay, I'm an author." And so the next question is, well, okay, well, what have you written? And I said, children's books. Now we can talk about kids, and we're fine. I made a mistake. I'll never do it again. In the early days, I sat down, the guy said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a channeler. I've channeled Kryon, magnetic master from the great central sun. He was a born again Baptist minister. And he yelled at me for 5 hours.
Oh, gosh.
People were asking him to be quiet. Somehow I offended him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I even
know your audience, right?
I said to him, I said, I know you're upset. I can tell you're upset. Please forgive me for, speaking out. And I said, but would you agree that it's good that we can love one beautiful God together? And he said, no, you're evil. So I had pushed a button, and that made me realize I ain't never going to push that button again anywhere for anybody. So I'm very careful. And why shouldn't I be? It's not that I don't believe my truth. It's that why should I upset somebody?
Yeah.
Knowing that.
Yeah, I understand that, because I think then you go down on a rabbit hole, and we use language actually it came from Anthony's linguistic background, called code switching. Mm-hmm. And so that's simply going into a conversation and meeting people where they're at.
That's correct.
So, things like galactic activations, and, this isn't going to sit well with even open-minded people. So I think there's a way to say the same thing: energy transmissions, healing, messages of love, right? These are simple, sort of benign messages that people can resonate with.
You're right. And there's so many ways of saying the same thing. And again, in the process, you don't want to have any trigger words that can upset anybody. And that's mainly because of what I will literally call the programming of what so many of us have had since birth, about what is real and what is not real, what is possible, what is not possible. And you dance around those things. And those things, by the way, change as you grow and realize, especially when you start talking to some scientists, and they say to you, somehow I've got involved with physicists over the years, and I found something to be so interesting. A physicist, more than most scientists, will raise their hand and listen to you, because they, of all people, know they don't know what they don't know. There's all manner of things hiding. And part of it is what we do. And since consciousness has now been proven as energy, they're interested, because now they deal with energy. So they are a very relaxed group of open-minded people.
Well, and I think also, the fact in the last 100 years, the quantum piece was always known, or at least proven, right, with the microscopic, tiny little aspects of matter, so to speak. And now it's been shown that it's, larger pieces of matter are affected by this quantum field. And so I think that that creates an opening, even though we don't know what we don't know, still, there's more open-mindedness around this conversation now.
I think that is exactly right. And it's exciting to think we don't know. If we can't actually pinpoint what it is, I think that's more fun. And the physicists I've talked to believe the same. They say, we don't know. So we're open. We don't know why gravity works either, and why a magnetic field works the way it does either, because both of those things are acknowledged as being somewhat multidimensional. So where our missing information truly is the knowledge of how multidimensional things actually interact with one another or with us. But we know now that we are multidimensional. There's been so much research there that and not just in DNA, but especially in consciousness, being energy.
So you brought up a word that is on my question list, and that's Kryon of magnetic service. So in a lot of your books, I mean, many of them, or if not all of them, you talk about the magnetic grid, right? So can you explain that connection for people in a way that makes sense?
No. Not easily. And I've done it a number of times. Let me just say this. Kryon in book 1 talked about something that we are dealing with right now and NASA is looking at. And that is when we are born into a soup of energy that is necessary for life. And part of that soup is not necessarily something that scientists have acknowledged is necessary. We are born into a magnetic field. That is how we are born. And this magnetic field does so much for us on this planet, not just protects us, it actually helps with our biology. It is some of the answers in high physics as far as disease and all that. When they discover how disease works and they realize there's magnetic pieces and parts. In other words, all of the magnetic forces that we're born with and around and have, they have worked for life. Kryon said, we cannot live outside of the magnetic field. So therefore, it is a prime player in as much as chemistry in who we are. Now, that also affects consciousness. Book 1, Kryon says, the magnetic field will move more in 100 years, in 10 years than it has in 100. And he's talking about the magnetic field you can measure with a compass. So that was the information right away, because this magnetic service is what Kryon was here for originally, was to help shift the magnetic grid. And you go, why? I mean, what's the reasoning for it? Here is the reasoning for it. If this will shift a little, it will open up the ability for us to think higher. In other words, we are actually part of this whole magnetic system. It's got to move. And it did. We even repainted runway numbers, which are compass headings. They've all been repainted because it started moving so quickly. We had whales beaching themselves, birds that didn't know where to go, and all of this, all through that time when Kryon was talking about this in those first years of the 90s. So we had all of that shifting of the magnetic field. So that was the precursor to what would happen at 2012 if we decided to continue on, which we did. Now, see, that's all part of the story. So the magnetic service really started with Kryon saying, I'm here to help shift the magnetic grid of the planet. And the reasoning, so that when the time comes, it will be then postured for higher consciousness. So there was never any scientific proof until the Global Consciousness Initiative and some of the things that you probably knew about heart math that they discovered, where consciousness now has to be energy. It affects magnetics. And so, bingo, now we understand it's a two-way street. Consciousness affects us, and the way we think affects it. This is now a study, and they've shown it very succinctly. So we are looking at consciousness being energy instead of something you couldn't measure. I mean, it couldn't even be identified by Plato. He couldn't define it. So now we realize it's a player in the energy grid of all we are. I have friends who are actually working with NASA right now, discussing longevity and health and how we can go to Mars with a 3-year journey. And they're just now starting to realize we're going to have to carry the magnetic grid because we can't live without it.
Wow.
And that is the message of Kryon in 1989, which, by the way, was not even on the experiment plate of NASA all through even what they have now with the space station. never ask that. What happens if we're outside of not gravity, but the magnetic grid of the planet? It's needed for life. We should have been hinted on that when we had the geophysical years, when we had the stations in the Arctic on both poles, and you realized that the people were getting leukemia and things like that when they were up there at a far greater rate than they were when they were in a balanced area. When you look at magnetics, when you sit on one pole, you're not balanced anymore. We need a balanced magnetics for life. So that's part of the answer. A long one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, actually, Roland McCready, who is also in the series, who's the head of research for HeartMath, he has some really interesting stats.
Consciousness is measurable to a certain degree. Consciousness is energy. We are multi-dimensional beings living in a multi-dimensional reality all at the same time. So I guess my question to you is, is this real?
Yeah, I know your question. Let me ask you, let me point something out to you. If you talk to a physicist, they'll say, time does not exist.
Right.
It is a construct that helps us to make sense of our single digit 4-dimension reality. So we live in something that needs time, and we all use it. I had to have it here to do this broadcast with you today, and we'll continue to use it. However, now let's talk about, can it be used out of the linear fashion? For instance, can you go back in time with your energy of your consciousness and change something that happened in a past life and change then coming forward who you are because of it? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, you don't change it. What you change is the reaction or your what happened around you and how you think about it. To now you're different because of the way you treated it. So you can change that much. When you get into this, we've watched Back to the Future too many times because we have these linear constructs that we put upon a multidimensional system. You know, you can't do this in time, you can't do that in time, you can't go ahead, you can't go behind because of this and that. You can throw that out the window. Can you go forward and put in your life things that'll help you to not step in a pothole? Can you cement the pothole before you get there? Can you, not knowing where it is, not knowing what's going to happen or anything about it, can you go there anyway with an energy of coherence in order to, when you get there, you'll see it, you'll understand it, and you'll say, I was here already. That's the deja vu. I'm moving forward. And the answer is yes. All of these things are metaphysical. Now, this is the definition of metaphysics, beyond physics. So we are already starting to understand how we can use the multidimensional time idea that's not linear in order to help ourselves. There's a lot of people trying to get through what's happened in the past. If you start to reframe and rewrite some of your reactions to what's happened in the past, whether it's been betrayal or sorrow or grief or whatever, and bring it forward to yourself now, you'll find suddenly you've actually gone back and helped yourself to exist better now, to have a better life now, and these things won't bother you. That's rewriting the past. You didn't change the thing that happened, you changed how you reacted to it. And as far as putting things in front of you, I've been doing that for years. It works. I create a reality so that when I get someplace, I recognize it. It says, this is exactly why I want to feel. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm peaceful with it because I know something's going to come in and I can feel it. It's coming in any minute. And something will come in, whether it's a new place you got to rent or whether it's a person you've got to meet, and it's all there. And you go, wow. And the people around you will go, you are so lucky. And you go, luck had nothing to do with this. I did this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we have a choice to change our reality in every single moment. Absolutely.
Every moment. So you've got to look at it. This is out of time. You have to realize that we are messing with, if you want to say it, our own time frame for ourselves And that's the way it's supposed to work, not for somebody else. And what we're doing is putting things in front of us and co-creating benevolence, good things for ourselves. And I believe this fully. I've been doing this now for years. It works. It works. Some people call it the law of attraction. You can call it whatever you want to, but it works.
Cause and effect,
Cause and effect.
Also we are emergent. Consciousness is emergent. The universe is emergent. It's a dance with each other. But speaking of time and chronological, I am curious because you've had some great topics across all the books, from alchemy of the human spirit, partnering with God, lifting the veil, and even parables, right? So I'm curious, did Kryon have a chronological order? Because in this linear world, it's almost, I know the guides that we kind of work with, they're like, well, you weren't ready for it yet, right? Your consciousness wasn't ready for it yet. So was there a specific chronological order of what Kryon felt the audience could handle?
Yeah, and it's not chronological and it's not hierarchical. It is energetic, just like you said. So the energy of when we can absorb what we are able to that's when it's presented. So some people will go back and look at some of the earlier books and say they're too simple. I know this, and I will say congratulations, you got it. You do know it. You can track, I would say, the increase in the way consciousness is working on our planet with regular folks, and a civilization that may not be interested in metaphysics is starting to raise. If I can just bring up one thing that I brought up many times, one of the we're talking about current events, if you don't mind, and that is that Kryon has given predictions, and they're not the kind of predictions that this is going to happen on a certain date or whatever. He'll give energy predictions to look for, and say, when you see this, then you'll know what this is happening, what this is doing. And he said, if you take a look at your planet and consciousness being energy, if consciousness is raising, that's the metaphor of more light coming in. Now, let's put that in a linear way. If you're in a dark room for a very long time and suddenly you turn on a bright light, there's all manner of ugly stuff that's going to show. And he said, you're going to see some ugly stuff, and you'll realize that it's always been there. Now it's time for you to clean it up or not. These are your free choices, but it's always been there, and it's been part of you. Now, when you start going beyond that, he said, look for, however, more than that. He said, when light starts to appear, there will be, if you want to, I don't like to just to say there's light and dark, because it sounds like there's a battle going on, but it's really kind of true. That if you want to look at something dark, that would be a lower consciousness. All right, the way people think. So let's take a look for a moment at what has happened just in the last year, because Kryon said the lower energies of the planet who are invested in keeping things in the dark will try to pull you back. Yeah. And it will be obvious that they are trying to recreate an older energy and asking you to buy into it. And then we got our war. And you saw that 1940s all over again. You got to see, you couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. But the reaction to the earth is what I want you to look at. Yeah. It didn't mean, it didn't care whether they were east, west, even including Switzerland. And Germany, who had 60% of their gas came from Russia. I mean, they all said, no, this is not acceptable. We're not going to support you. We're not going to go your route. We're not going to do the things you want to. We're backing out. And almost the entire planet said, no, that is a first, an absolute first. And this is one of the things that Kryon said in two ways, really. He said, look for those who would try to bring you back to what they thought you'd like, and look for also a different conscious reaction from the way it's always been through history. And we got them.
Yeah, that was powerful. I mean, even COVID to some degree, right? Because that really was this collective consciousness bringing it forth, aching, right? Because we're so out of balance. So, that's a great example because people bring that up a lot and people look at the negative side to it. But it's like, wow, have we ever had reaction like this before?
No,
Never.
no.
Right.
And the negative side of it is so sad. I mean, we are still in the battle. The battle is going to be with us. And it's called duality. I mean, you can call it anything you want to. But it really is, it's a battle of dark and light, of consciousness raising on the planet. My heart goes out to the women of Iran. That, you look at coups and these things, those are usually men with rifles and all. And you got these women saying, no more. Something's got to change. And that this is a powerful statement. It's dangerous. They're very courageous. Wow.
Afghanistan too. Afghanistan.
Oh, yes. There's a lot of stories we'll find out later about how things worked and happened, and maybe we're not getting the full picture, or maybe we will, but we know what's happened on the planet, and we know who stood for what they stood for. And that is, just like you said, it's important to see that. That is a change, that has to be a change of consciousness. One of the things that also, I work with Greg Braden quite a bit. One of the books he wrote had to do with time. It's called Fractal Time. Now, this is a Hay House book of maybe 15 years ago. Yeah. But he examined something that was really interesting. Have you ever heard the term time repeats itself?
Oh, yeah.
Or how about history repeats itself?
Yep.
And we see that. Is there actually any science of time, since we know it's a construct, that would allow for this to happen? In other words, we are not learning from our experiences. So you have a war, it rests for a while until a new generation comes up, and then they repeat the war with the same people and the same countries. And you take a look and you go, here we go again. Why? I mean, didn't we learn the last time that it doesn't work? Well, that's been the way it has been just for eons. And you look at this, it's almost like a train track that continues to go in the same circle, not even knowing it's going in the same circle. And Greg Braden actually brought to the fore some science that said there's actually some reasoning for it. We get the same thing at the Hopi Indian rock, the prophecy, where it draws a line that shows that same situation, and that there would come a time when we would be able to go on a new train track. And that was 2012. This is metaphoric. And that is what has happened, is we are now off of that old track onto another one, which, by the way, has no history. So this new train track we're on, having no history at all to draw from, some people don't like that because it feels like there's no basis. Where are we going? We're in the dark. Things feel different. We don't know where we're heading anymore. I think part of the old train track was us being comfortable with dysfunction.
So true, right? So true. I mean, and the Mayan calendar said the same thing, right? Exactly. The Mayan calendar.
Yeah. Well, the Mayan calendar, and we're very familiar with that too, having been there so many times and talked to the elders, been to Xochicalco in Mexico and looked in some of their observatories. And when you really start to take a look at that, that calendar was 5,125 years long. And what they said is here comes a new calendar. They didn't say it was the end of time. They just said it was the end of this calendar. And the new calendar was going to be representative, if we wanted to, of the highest consciousness the planet had ever had. The old calendar had to leave because it was an old consciousness calendar. It was the old train track.
Yeah.
Right. So the new one is here, and the Mayan calendar experience lets you know what the Indigenous saw and felt and channeled. Very much so. Most of them did. And we're in it. And in this, a lot of people are uncomfortable because they don't feel the same way. They don't feel the same energies, and they don't know what to do with them. And I just say congratulations. Now we can shape a future that was never able to be shaped before, because these older energies are starting to lose. And when Kryon, we sat in Habima Theater in Tel Aviv, Israel, and just me on stage with 1,000 people in the theater. And this is in Israel, and that's the hot spot. They are of the opinion there, and if you talk to them in Israel, that the situation will always be the same. that there's no solution to the situation. And Kryon told him some things. He says, you're still in black and white on that situation. He says, the earth is starting to colorize itself. Color is coming. And when you start to see color, you'll understand how simple the black and white is to you. And then he said, stop teaching your children who to hate.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. I mean, I lived in Israel on a kibbutz. I'm not actually Jewish, technically, anyway, in this lifetime, at least.
Yeah.
But lived on a kibbutz when I was 18 years old, and I've been back, to Israel a few times since then. And, there's powerful energy there. And there are some things that are happening to have, the conversations. I mean, Thomas Hubel's work with, trauma, collective trauma, healing the grids and healing the planet. So, we are starting to see shifts.
Also, Kryon says you cannot, this is going to be germane to what's happening. You cannot bring back old energy leaders and expect new energy.
That's right.
If there's no here and there, up and down, left and right, black and white, in the end, if there is an end, in the beginning, if there is a beginning, what is there truly?
And what Kryon has said is that it's all together in a soup of energy that we then compartmentalize in the way we do in order to exist the way we have to. So we are the ones who put it together in black and white. We're the ones that have made it, whether there's a bridge or no bridge or whatever. None of those things are real. That's what we do. But that's what's changing. The mix of how we put those things together as human beings is starting to change to such a degree that there'll come a day when we will admit it isn't even there. And it's gonna come very, very slowly. Kryon says this is what other planets have done. They've gone into an ascension status. He's even gone so far as to say that the old energy scriptures, when they see angels and whatever, we want to see angels. What if they weren't? What if instead they were ascended beings from other places who were here to help us? And so there's a whole lot of that going on too, and people are understanding that perhaps we shouldn't fear the UFO experience. What if they've been here watching? What if they've life started very, very late on this planet? What if they had 1,000,000 years head start? What if they are learning what we're learning and have passed the tests? They just got to leave us alone because there are things that we have to learn ourselves. Yeah. So in that statement, it's correct. And if you talk to physicists, we're nothing but space between us, and yet it doesn't relate to anybody who's cooking dinner. That none of these things for their kids, but the way we cook our dinner will change.
Yeah. No, that's a great example, actually.
Yeah. And so eventually we will start using the tools that we were born with that are high physics, very high consciousness, and we won't have any problems anymore with food for the planet, electricity for the planet. We'll know how to do these things without hurting the planet. Health will last a lot longer. This all is going to be coming with a higher consciousness and how we cook our dinner. And that's a metaphor for how we put these things together. Are we coherent with our fellow human beings? Yeah. Do we love them enough? Do we have compassion? Do we know what compassionate action is? All of those things create other energies. When you swing the gamut to the dark side, they create no energy. Not really. They just sit there and invite reaction. Every time you practice compassionate action, you're actually creating new energy. This is why the hope of the planet is that the more we experience solving things, the more we realize that it is creating new energy on the planet for more solution. It's like when you have empathy, when you have when you get together and you're mad at somebody, and finally one of the two of you gets honest and says, I really wanted to like you, but here's why I'm having a problem. Help me, please, with this. Can't we get along? And then the other one says, well, here's why I don't like you. But yes, I would like to get along. And pretty soon you end up hugging each other. Something happened. Yeah. And in that something, that is higher consciousness, that's understanding, that's compassion. instead of competition. So these are the new energies we're looking for, and we're starting to see them.
Yeah. And we can use that same analogy and example with politics, the economy, education,
Yep.
And of course the planets, which I do want to talk about, because we've talked about the Indigenous elders and their truth and their wisdom that we've really shunned, right, as white privileged people on this planet for so long. And I love that we're going back to their wisdom and it's being elevated now, right? Because they always knew. So I'd love to talk about Gaia, because you have written about it in the Kryon book, and also with Monica, who we're going to have on this series as well. And part of the teaching was this example, right? That the Indigenous knew that Gaia was part of them. And I love this piece, and I can't remember which book. Oh, I think it was in the recalibration of Gaia, that they didn't need to pray for rain, that they simply knew that they were connected to Earth. And Kryon says more than pray, they used ceremonies of alignment, not prayers of asking. Can you elaborate on that? I just love that. It was so beautiful.
Everybody who looks at Indigenous think that they were worshiping the planet. They were not worshiping the planet. They were having acknowledgement that the planet was part of them. There is a system that we are part of. And any Indigenous who really was connected to the earth would say, we knew how to see the system working and be part of it. And so when it came time for us needing rain, we worked the system. We didn't pray to the rain god. That's not what we did. And working the system had to do with ceremony. And that's why ceremony is such an important thing to Indigenous. They are actually, changing the what you would call the relationship to the gears. And they usually got it. They usually got the rain. So what they did was the rain came in from one place and went back to another. So they understood their relationship to the parts. And the parts were the planet is us as well. Kryon says it has sentience. The rocks can breathe. These are metaphors, all to say that there are things we don't know yet, even how we define life. And that will change as well. So what we look at with the Indigenous is a system that we are relearning. And you're right, we're seeing a whole lot more, I would say, flow of understanding. There's a lot of things we could say there, but we're beginning to understand a lot more of, I would say, the attributes of what the Indigenous knew, that we can then see the wisdom of. There are other things that are just outside this box that we're starting to discover too. For instance, we've just got involved with Dr. Clint Rogers, who is working with wonderful ancient Indian methods from India of healing, and you're realizing that they have herbology there, Ayurvedic, some of it, that is, they were working with curing diseases hundreds of years before America was even here. And yet we discount that. Now we're rediscovering it and saying, could you send us some of those herbs, please? Because they seem to be something to working, and none of them are drugs. And so, that opens a door to another agenda and what science wants and what we want. But you see, there's so much to learn. We were in Rapa Nui talking to one of the lead shamans there. There's a plant that grows in their volcano. Monica is so much better at this because she remembers everything. It's hard to live with a woman who remembers everything, but and the plant when harvested creates a chemical that people use for when you have a heart replacement or a liver replacement or something like that, where you have to then take drugs because they reject each other. One body rejects the other, that it calms that down and it makes them, it gives them coherence. And that's right from nature. And that's growing at the bottom of the volcano in Rapa Nui in Easter Island. So there's a lot of this that we are also missing that the Indigenous all knew about.
Why is it that you often speak of Kryon, but you don't speak of you?
It was 8 years ago that Kryon asked the same question.
I ask you the same question.
Because you're such an amazing teacher yourself, by the way.
Well, Kryon said, "Are you done playing church?"
Right. Church. That's right.
I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, you go to a place and you sit down and you channel, and people come see you and they dress different."
Mhm.
He said, and then you get up and everything's different. He says, "You're used to a linear presentation of me coming in when you sit in a chair when the lights are low. And then everything changes later." And he said, "It's time for the meld."
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Right. And he said, "You need to do this 24/7 so that you can channel and nobody will know you're channeling."
That's correct.
The living avatar.
You have to remember something. You don't channel us. We channel you. We are one with you all the time.
That's what Kryon said.
And we will always be one with you all the time.
Mm.
And there will always be love.
Always.
Always love.
And that's
Right.
when my life changed.
Yes.
That's when I met Monica.
Mm.
That's when everything switched and changed. And so that's when I started to realize that we can actually assimilate
Yes.
mastery.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's beautiful, actually, that full integration, right? Which is really what they taught in ancient India, all the sages and mages, right? All the
Right.
training they went through was, we call them avatars, but it's really just the merging with spirit and our human form.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think you'll find this in the Indigenous as well. They
Yeah.
call it different things, but they believe the same.
So I do want to talk about DNA in the quantum field. This piece was riveting for me. I'm trying to remember what book it was in. Well, it was definitely in your book 12, which I had a hard time getting. Such a hard time getting that the only version I could get was a torn book, which I'm not very.
It's now available again.
Yeah, I'm not happy with that. I can't remember where it is. I paid a lot of money for this torn book.
I know, because all we had to do is stop printing things and they're more valuable.
But so I think it was in the 12 layers, but also in another book, it was mentioned as well. And that's DNA has a quantum engine.
Yeah.
I thought this was fascinating, that DNA must work together in the human body for the intelligence of what we call the innate of the human body to function. And then this part is Kryon really trying to get us out of our linear thinking again, saying that our molecules must act as one set of instructions. And then, here it is. Yes, this was in the recalibration of the new human, but also in the 12 layers of the DNA. So it's in both of those books. So that one set of instructions for healers and everyday people. How can we make sense of that in a practical way? If we're Reiki practitioners, massage therapists, energy healers, what does that mean in that one set of instructions?
I want you to think of creating coherence with the molecules like you would with heart math. So if you studied the process of getting a group of people into coherence and what it means, you're studying the field. The field is the same inside the body with your innate as it is outside the body. Consciousness inside the body plays the same role as it might outside the body. You can create coherence inside your body so that disease won't even attach itself to you. And so this is Kryon's method of giving you that. And he says it's done because your DNA has a field. And that quantum field is a coherent field if you want it to be, but it can snap together in a way that you can feel and create health for you if you will concentrate on it. Now, from the first time we ever talked about the human body, Kryon says, you are the boss. He says, you're taught in your culture that you live here. That's it. And then you look down at your body and you say, well, I sure hope you last. Like you have nothing to do with it at all. This is the teaching. We've never been taught that your consciousness is king and the boss, and can actually influence your heart, your liver, your everything. Influence it to the degree that you can create coherence there with your consciousness. This is the meditation. These are the meditation warriors that know this, that spend all the time doing this and bringing their body into coherence, because there is a quantum field in every part of DNA. And that is all part of the molecules in your body. So the idea is to snap them together into coherence and walk around with that. This is just makes sense. If we're gonna have an ascended consciousness on this planet, our bodies have got to come along with us.
No, I mean, that's really well said. And, you brought up Greg Braden, whose work we love, and then also Dr. Joe Dispenza, who, through the research of getting people in a meditative state, into that theta brainwave state, that they're literally seeing it on graphs. The research is there showing the coherence.
Yeah. So coherence is the king. And this whole idea of that's been presented, my model is Lynn McTaggart. Lynn McTaggart has put
together. Love her. We love her. She's actually in this series as well.
Excellent. Well,
we love her.
The whole idea of bringing groups to coherence, and then groups on different parts of the planet to be in coherence. But I think her main work has been the Power of Six, which she has, which has had multiple healings. These 6 people together, working together closely, you wouldn't think this would happen. When they get to know each other, suddenly there's healings going on. They become coherent, and the sum of the parts is greater than the parts. And this is what she's discovered and found out. What a pioneer in physics, as far as I'm concerned, is Lynn McTaggart. But it's the same principle. We're looking at our power of consciousness over our own cellular structure.
Yeah. And actually, what's amazing about Lynn's work, in our interview with her, she talked about that wasn't necessarily a magic number. It's not like it has to be that number. But what she was finding, I mean, any group will do essentially, but it's that intention, right, around it. And then the other interesting piece about the research of the field was that she said it wasn't just those that you were intending to heal, but it went both ways. It was a symbiotic relationship that when you were doing the healing, you too were getting healed.
And I misstated. It's a power of 8.
8, yeah, power of 8.
That's right. So I just got the number wrong, but you're right. It could be 9 or 10 or what, but she chose 8. 8, by the way, is a Tibetan numerology number for abundance. I like that. So it could be abundant health or whatever. But she chose the 8, and that's what has worked.
I want to just change a little bit, and I want to speak about children, because children are, for me, very important. I'm a pediatric speech language pathologist, and I work with children that often have autism. And when I work with them, I often try to bring them out of a dimension, you might say, bring them into this particular dimensional field, because they have to function here, not there. That's one way of looking at it. There are other things that I do as well. But you mentioned something about children. Can you speak about children being born today and their relationship to spirit or to the consciousness that is evolving here now at this present moment?
When we wrote the Indigo Children books, it was channeled information by another woman, Nancy Tappy, who had the ability. She had synesthesia. Synesthesia is a scrambling of the way your brain is wired. She said she used to be able to eat peas and taste triangles, and so you've got to really go into that brain to understand what synesthesia is. So as a synesthesiac, she saw colors around people, and the colors were often personality types, but there was more to it. And then she started to see newborns with the indigo color. So it had nothing to do with auras or any of that. That had to do with perceptions of a synesthesiac. That was a basic for the Indigo Children book. But what she was saying was new children are being born on the planet. Now, this is 20, 30 years ago. And the difference that we're starting to see is that they were wiser. So it wasn't that they were smarter, but they were wiser. And there really is a difference there. And so you would see more of an old soul attribute, somebody who's been through a lot. Child comes in, they recognize a situation, whereas instead of being afraid of it, they were more in tune with it. That also included an increase in what you're going to, and that's been shown in autism. And that is all related. And it's almost like the most autism ones we have are almost savants. You said something. You've got to bring them in from their dimension to yours, but you've got to go to theirs first to get them, and you know it, and convince them that it's safe in ours, because they've discovered something that if they can take their brain and take out some of the compartmentalization, they're safer. And so this includes, now here's your field, linguistics. So there's many of them that don't want to hear words in a row. They're going to be better off with pictures. They're going to be better off with other ways, because they don't want to linearize things. So this is tough. It's really tough. But you're seeing some of the models of the future of where we'll be. We're going to have to become multidimensional and take some of the barriers out too. So we're only just beginning, I think, to see the children echo where we're going to be someday. And God bless you for working with these kids, because this is really tough. It's really tough for the parents. It's tough for the children. But once you get them into a place where they can work a little bit in our dimension, I think they're a lot more comfortable. There's a great story that I wish I could cite this, because scientifically it'd be better off, of an autistic and a dolphin. They were working with a dolphin. I think it was here on the West Coast, and they actually got communication between the dolphin and the autistic child, because they would have they'd throw different shapes in the water, a triangle, a square, and whatever, and the child would then tell the dolphin what shape to go get. And so you see, it's a whole different kind of communication, nothing to do with language as we know it. And the success rate was really, the P factor and the statistics were a lot greater than it should be. So they were seeing almost 70, 80% of coherence there. So they were excited about it. And what happened was that they lost the contract, and the dolphin was shipped to Florida. And so, but somebody came up with the idea is, why shouldn't we continue the experiments just because there's distance? So they continued them from California to Florida, and they got the same results.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. I imagine that. Yeah. So that leads us to the topic of information, right? Information in the crystalline grid, or the Akash. Yeah. And the link that I want to make to this, because now we're calling the auric field, or the field in some circles, the biofield, right? People like Dr. Shamini Jain and others of her ilk are talking about it as the biofield. And then, of course, on the spiritual side, we refer to it as the crystalline grid, where the Akash lives. Can you make that connection, bringing in both science and spirituality to this crystalline grid, as well as the Akash, or the Akashic records?
The crystalline grid, according to Kryon, is an earth grid. It's not a human grid. And he says this is something that is metaphysical. It is laid upon the planet for the Akash. And here's how it works. He said, first of all, let's prove it's there. You have somebody who's walking in a field, and they grab their heart and they say, something has happened here. Now, we have this all the time. You have sensitives who can walk around and go, something has happened here. And then you find out later that it is a battlefield, perhaps, that is taking place. And so they're right. Something has happened here. There have been those who've died. There's been trauma. There's whatever. So you just stop everything. Scientifically, what did they feel? How did they do this? And it's not acceptable to say, well, they're just sensitives. There has to be a process. There has to be some science. There always is. We can't just say it's there because it's in the ethers, or because they're spiritual. There's always a reason, even if we haven't discovered it yet. God is the master physicist. So there are layers of cause and effect in everything we do. So what Kryon says is they have just sensed the crystalline grid.
Wow.
And the
Yeah.
crystalline grid is the result of every action that has happened with humans everywhere on the planet stays in the earth. And so this helps us because when we return, we connect with that in a wise way. And if I could just turn the page, we were with Nicholas Picard in Peru. Now he is a shaman. He runs shaman courses. We were there with our people to learn from him. We sat at his feet. One day he picked up some dirt and put it on his lips. And we said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "My ancestors are in the dirt. Wherever they have happened." Now, he was of the Q'ero tribe, which was hundreds of miles from Peru. And he says, it doesn't matter who they were or where they were on the planet. They're all in the dirt. That's the crystalline grid. And so all of the wisdom, everything that has happened, and that's part of Gaia. That's part of the partnership that the Indigenous teach as well. And he taught it. There is a crystalline grid that helps us to remember. And so wherever I walk and whatever I do, for instance, I'm aware of, don't go over there because there's something there that I shouldn't walk in or whatever. It's as simple as that because we have this kind of help. So this is Kryon's take on the crystalline grid and how it affects and works with our Akash.
And it's all interconnected. And, I wonder too, is there a relationship there between entanglement, right? With, everything's interconnected and what we feel here is something else feels elsewhere. So I wonder if there's not a connection there.
Entanglement is just a word we use for the process that we're seeing in the field. So the field is an entanglement itself, if you want to say that. So entanglement is the buzzword these days, but it truly is simply a nomenclature of what we're now discovering that's always been there.
Question?
No, I really like the idea of the Akash being part of this earth form, this earth. And oftentimes a soul, you might say, will come back, or it will not come back. It's always here, but it comes and it's accessing the memories of things that once were. And in that way, souls are able to work through individuals in ways that we don't completely understand. Just as Yeshua will say, I am the man that once was this being, but I'm working through you in order to show you how things once were, or things of that nature.
Yeah, this is what makes an old soul, according to Kryon. And you return and pick up the wisdom that you learn in some degree. And so the crystalline grid is a vehicle of storage. And it's named crystalline because the crystal is one of the only elements that holds memory. So, that's the nomenclature of it, and that's why it's called that. So an old soul that comes back picks up what they've learned, basically from Gaia, not from their soul, according to Kryon. And that then is the partner Gaia is, and helps you. You pick that up, you continue, you come back, you pick that up and continue. So it's like a school, an Akashic school. And that's why we've got a lot of old souls are starting to pick up a whole lot of stuff now that they never picked up before. That is what's causing a lot of I think, the changes on the planet.
So, but it's interesting too, because in book 14, right, The New Human, it talks about how evolution will now be energy based, not chemical based, and will unlock hidden wisdom and cellular efficiency, something that is already there and built in. So, you also talk about how, through Kryon, the magnetic grid of the earth is this multidimensional energy, which we've been talking about, which transfers certain things to your DNA on a day-to-day basis. So in that way, the grid becomes this major energy transfer system. So I'm kind of curious that the DNA must carry our Akashic information also.
It does. And Renee, there's something happening. And that you've just said it in the words that Kryon gave it in the book. There come a time when you don't have to have a lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. You're going to get it from the old souls who are here. there's energy transference. So you'll find and meet others. You'll go to a channel or not, or you'll hear somebody or be something, and you'll start absorbing the light and the wisdom from them directly. And this is why we're seeing a lot more of what Anthony is doing today, and it's being accepted and seen as okay and correct. People want it. They don't want to have to die and come back and die and come back. They say, I want your wisdom. What can you do? Can I sit at your feet? And then at the same time, we have a technical explosion of the ability to share it. You think that's an accident? So here we are. We can talk to thousands of people at a time. They can feel us. They can share with us. They can tell whether we're accurate, the real thing or not. And that's all there. And then they can tune in or not and start getting things from us. That's why we're here.
Yeah, that's amazing. The energy transfer, really powerful.
Isn't it?
Does Yeshua have a question?
No. But you do understand that your spirituality and your science are always working together. And then when they come together as one again, don't they? Do you see how it all works? Everything is connected, but it is always of love all the time. If only you knew that.
Nothing in the energy that we have is competitive. Nothing.
No.
Yeah.
And yet we have often set up our culture to be that way. When we start to understand that it's not that way, that we are more together and connected, we're wired to be connected.
Yeah, we are wired to be connected. That was actually, the other thing that I do is run one of the producers and curators of TEDx Berkeley, and Dr. Shamini Jain had literally talked about that. That was, in fact, I think the title of her topic, her talk was we're wired to connect or wired to heal. So I have to ask this question because it's something I've been curious about for a very long time. And it's the Merkaba, because we use it and our guides will show us, this Merkaba. We keep getting dragged back into our ancient Judaic past from past lives, it appears. And so that's also mentioned in a few of the books, including the last one, book 14. It's illustrated in ancient Judaic history as well. It's in the Kabbalah. How does Kryon see the Merkaba?
Kryon has said we are an energy bubble. You can't deny it. You go into a movie theater and sit down if you're alone, and you move because there's something wrong, and you realize the person next to you is either unbalanced or sick. You feel it. So there has to be some kind of a vehicle that precedes you or is around you that most people deny. Kryon even gave it a measurement. That measurement, by the way, is, I've always felt it was the average, that it gets bigger and smaller, of 21 or 20 meters, something. It was like, I forgot, 8 feet, or no, it was pretty big, actually. I forget now. It wasn't that important. It was only that Kryon said, you carry an energy bubble around with you that expands and contracts. When you enter a room, how do you want that energy bubble to be perceived?
Wow.
Yeah. If you project with yourself compassion and love wherever you go, and you can, he says that's what people will feel, and it disarms a lot of trouble and people who have already judged they don't like you or whatever, and you can't deny it. It works. Yeah. And so this is just Kryon's way of saying that we are bigger than we think. And this energy bubble we carry around, and we can call it the Merkaba, is complex. It's a geometry, which is sacred, if you want to start looking at it, as it all is. But we use it. We can use it. You can use it every time you go into the store or wherever. How do you want that projection to look?
Yeah. So all of these projections of who you are.
That's right.
And you can change this projection,
this
perception at any time you desire.
And Metatron's cube.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is what your bubble is.
That's right.
You're creating beautiful bubbles around yourself in quite unique forms, like a snowflake.
So back to coherence. What if we have coherence with the atmosphere,
Mm,
coherence with the energy in the room?
mm,
So we then lock into that wherever we walk, and people can feel it. They
yes.
can know you're safe. That's one of the biggest things. You're not competing with them, because we are competing society. So you walk, you meet somebody new at a gathering or something, and they like you, and they realize you're safe, and they can talk to you. That's your Merkaba at work.
Yes.
Yeah, that's your heart, like just reaching out and wanting to love somebody up, or
Yeah,
you know.
that's right.
By the way, I have to bring up this because it just I was cracking up when I read this, because this has happened to me before, because I lived in Africa as an exchange student and traveled, quite extensively. And I can't remember what book it was, but this is just for people who haven't read your books. The grace of your sense of humor that gets laced throughout the books, that I just found wonderful. And you'll have to remind us of where it was, but you were traveling for business, and it was in I can't remember where it was, but you were sitting at a table and you were looking around, and everybody who was local there wasn't getting bit by mosquitoes. But there you were, the white guy, off in the corner, and you're getting bit by mosquitoes. Can you remind us of that story? Because when I read that, I was cracking up.
I don't even remember it, Renee. You're better than I am in that one.
I can't remember what book it was, because it was definitely a while ago. It was a while ago that I read it, but I just cracked up. And that was like the moment I said, I have to meet this man.
Well, I can tell you one of the things that wasn't mosquitoes, was flies in Uluru in Australia, in the Red Center at Ayers Rock. We realized that only the tourists were wearing fly nets, and the Aborigines were not. And that's when we realized that they'd figured it out a long time ago. They were, the flies weren't interested in them. It's
Isn't
only
that
the
funny?
tourists.
Yeah.
It became I'm sure a paradigm or a metaphor or something. But yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, even in any culture, right? I remember going up and for the magazine writing a feature article about polar bears in northern Canada. And, all of the locals who were white, by the way, they didn't need the stuff that we needed.
Yeah.
Like their blood got used to it. Do you have a final question?
No final questions. Just an honor to be here with you and to be in your energy bubble and to absorb it and to become one with it again.
Do you have any additional thoughts, comments, and also things that you'd like to let people know about your work, your community, and things that you're working on, that people can sign up, follow you, become part of your voice and all of the teachings?
It's easy these days. Cryonmasters.com will get you right to our site. Everything is there. If you're interested in my work, that's where to peek at it. But mainly, the message that I would have to anybody listening is, don't fear the future, even though it looks ugly. And if you find that it's looking ugly, then you're watching the news, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Stop watching the news. Go, and I'll say that, and Renee knows this, if you're going to find a real journalist, it'll be in somebody writing about it and not on television. They're entertainers. And they're also at the beck and call of those producers who tell them what story to tell. It's scored with music, and they have an agenda for sponsorship. It's just not where you want to get your news. You want to find places on the internet that you can trust, that you like. You recognize the journalist and start reading your news at your own rate. That's going to give you a lot better idea. And then don't make it just your country. Take a look at some of the other journalists in the other parts of the world, and you'll get a lot more news that's less fearful. There is an agenda for our media to frighten us, because they need to have us stay tuned. They need to have us buy their products. So I think you see where this is going. So we've already seen what they did with COVID. You got to see that they could have helped us. They could have comforted us. And what they did was frighten us. And the rest is history. So just now that you see that, we can see it's easy to frighten you with the news. So get your news where you trust it, and realize light is starting to win on this planet, regardless of what you're told.
Mhm.
Oh, that's beautifully said. And as someone who has been in the media industry for 30 years, it is unfortunate. And there's definitely sources that I do trust because I know the journalists, right? But yeah, there's influence there. That is absolutely true. There's no getting around that. So well said. Discernment, discernment, discernment. And I think feeling into what is true for you, because at the end of the day, we are all our own gurus, right? Yeah, what a wonderful time, an amazing time. And we'll make sure to put links to your work on the subsequent pages so people can find out about you and how to order all of your books.
Thank you.